Join us every Wednesday for In Focus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. In Focus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to a special edition of In Focus. In Focus is a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. Well, this week, the Honorable Dr. Terrance led administration is celebrating its first year in office. Now, from its inauguration to now, the administration has made tremendous strides and implemented noteworthy initiatives to advance the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Federation as a whole. Today, we sit down with the Honorable Dr. Terrance, the fourth Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, to discuss the achievements of his government and plans for the future. Stay with us as we delve in your government, your business. Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to welcome the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terrance. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for having me. It's my first time on In Focus, and I look forward to a very interesting conversation. Let me congratulate you on this program.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister, and we certainly are grateful that you would have been able to appear at this time, and of course it's a special time for you. And so we want to start, dear Prime Minister. It's been a year. As we recap from the beginning of now to your journey, what can you tell us in terms of what it means to you to be the fourth Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, to hold the highest elected office in the land, where you attend to the population of 50,000 people and growing every day?
I would say, Ian, it means a life of service, an office of service. I see being the Prime Minister as an opportunity to serve people and to serve the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And when I enter office on a daily basis or weekly basis, that is what is my focus. How can I better serve the people who have given me the opportunity to serve them? So that is what it really means to me. And by extension, what can I do together with my team in cabinet, my fellow colleagues, those who are in the civil service, the citizenry, to bring about policies and to implement changes that would be changes to benefit the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so I see this as service, and service to better the lives of our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Now, of course, you're a medical doctor by profession, and so there is that aspect of service in there. Would you say it was a difficult transition to moving from a life of medicine to a life of politics?
Of course, politics has its nuances, and so does medicine. However, both, as you have pointed out, are really professions of service. And so the transition has not been as difficult as people might perceive it to be. Because when I worked as a medical doctor, that is exactly how I saw it. I sought to serve my patients to the best of my ability and to serve them well. And that is the same type of attitude that I bring to the office of the Prime Minister. How can I treat my people well? How can I serve them well? Giving the best of what I can give. And where there are opportunities to seek new competencies, new resources, to collaborate more, to make sure that we achieve the goals. So in a sense, it's a transition, yes, but it's not a difficult transition in the sense that it's serving people in one capacity and moving to serve them in another capacity. But I will tell you this, for medicine, you learn people, you understand people, and that has given me the opportunity to understand the populace, and therefore puts me in a position of how I can better serve them. Of course, collaborating with them, and working not from a self perspective, but a team's perspective. How can we work together to better our situation here in St. Kitts and Nevis? So in that sense, I would not say it was that difficult.
And of course, it's important for medical professionals to have a good bedside manner, which can be difficult, I imagine, in times dealing with some of the personalities as well in politics.
Yes, I mean, of course, human beings are human beings, and there are persons who might have, some challenging, personalities and ways in which they deal with things. However, the way that they handle things should not dictate how I handle them. I should always seek to handle them with respect and from a decorum of service. And that is what I always seek. So I do not allow people's attitude and approach to dictate how I approach them. And I have learned that significantly from my medical profession. But I think my own personal disposition is to treat people with respect. And I think that helps as well.
Prime Minister, almost immediately after being sworn in as Prime Minister, you signed off on 3 significant initiatives, and I'll just list them here because, I think the persons, they've been ventilated properly in the media throughout the years. Very significant initiatives.
Yes.
The first would be free tuition at the Clarence Fitzroy Brent College. Yes. The second would be the end of COVID-19 travel restrictions, and the third is the financial assistance for children who are sick in St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, what was the common thread behind these 3 initiatives being made as your first moves as Prime Minister?
Right. If you look at all 3, one being firstly opening up the country. And then the second one, when we move to really deal with those at the college and also to deal with the children matter. And all this, the common thread was, what can I do very quickly to improve the lives of our people, and especially those who are being affected mostly. And that is the common thread, making people's lives better. The COVID-19 restrictions, as I've said, were unnecessary up to the point when I took the opportunity to sit with the task force. Because the first question I asked in that, I want to see the scientific data, because I was not going to make an irresponsible decision. But just because of my profession, and I had looked at the data, I recognized that we could have lifted the restrictions. And when the data was presented to me, and that was, I think, August 6th, 5th, 6th, August 7th, it was a Sunday, and they presented that information to me, I said immediately, tomorrow, Monday, we are going to lift the restrictions. So it was a responsible act. But opening up the country opened up the economy and gave people a chance to resume activities to better their livelihood, to better their standard of living, a condition of living. People were able to resume their livelihoods that had been taken away from them because of COVID-19 restriction. And by then, because of bad government policy, because the restrictions could have been totally lifted since May. And that's May, June, July, August, an extra 3 months. And that hurt us. It hurt our tourism recovery. So again, that decision was, how can I make people's lives better? The other one with the children, for me, was almost an obvious one. Working as a medical doctor, I remember parents coming to me with children who had very challenging medical conditions, mainly congenital conditions, meaning they were born with these conditions, or they would have had these conditions early in their lives, very, very early, and they needed medical care abroad. Some of them, of course, develop over time, but children still in primary school. And I used to see the parents come and they're asking me, how can I get the money? And so we will contact PALS. PALS is an excellent organization that would go to the breadths and lengths of everything to help those parents and children.
And just to clarify, the PALS is the Pediatric Assistance League.
Yes, excellent. And I want to give them a shout out and thank them for all the significant good work that they have been doing. But sometimes PALS was not enough. And I would see the parents put up GoFundMe page, and they would go around with a sponsor sheet. And the child's life is in the balance, depending on whether or not the sponsorship could raise enough money, or the GoFundMe would raise enough money. And I said then that no child in St. Kitts and Nevis should go through that. And one of the first things that I would seek to introduce once elected and given the opportunity by the people was to create a fund so that any child who needed medical care abroad would be guaranteed the financial assistance, and we have done so. And we have helped a number of children, and we have saved their lives. And today they have an opportunity to live a long, prosperous life, whereas they would have, they would not have had such a good opportunity had that policy not put in place. And then the other one, when it came to the college, I found a lot of young people came out of school and said to me, well, I had to go to work to help my mother because my mother can't afford college. And all going through my head is, the persons who need it the most are those who are from households that have the least financial services, or the poorer households. And I'm saying, these persons need the education. I grew up fundamentally with my grandmother. She was a sugarcane worker, a poor woman. And I'm saying, if I did not have the educational opportunities, I would not have been able to elevate and move on. These young people who are talented, who are bright, all they want is an opportunity. And I decided, and my team decided, that there should not be a barrier to prevent talented young people from going forward. And so it was a decision that we will make CFBC tuition free. So you can go to high school in St. Kitts free, and you're supposed to be able to go to college free. And just now we are going to expand the support to preschool. So we want, from the time you are born, you have an opportunity as a human being here in St. Kitts and Nevis to fulfill your full potential. So we want you to have good health care, good education, and a good, peaceful society that is an enabling society to allow you to become who you are intended to be. And so those three things, in terms of taking care of the children's health, making sure that they have education, and opening up the economy so that people can get back to work, get back to their lives, relieve themselves of the stress and the anxiety and the depression, because mental health issues are serious issues associated with COVID. A lot of people became depressed. A lot of people became anxious. People suffered psychotic episodes because of the stresses that they suffered from COVID. And therefore, not only for their economic well-being or financial well-being, but also for their mental health. We had to act as quickly as possible, when it's possible, and scientifically so people could have gotten back to their livelihoods and to their lives so that they can really get on with living.
Prime Minister, you mentioned that, of course, the government very soon will seek to have an intervention in terms of preschool. Do you have a timeline for that, maybe this year, next year?
Well, we are looking to see what we can do as soon as possible. We're already doing the studies to see how much it will cost. But the reason why we want to do that is that we want to help the single mothers in St. Kitts and Nevis even more. Because a lot of our households, the majority of our households are headed by single mothers. They have children. Sometimes people would say, well, I couldn't send my child to preschool this week because I did not have the money. That should not be happening here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we are quickly moving along. I don't want to give an exact date, but as soon as that is in, and I'm looking to introduce it as quickly as possible, so that the children, especially of the single mothers, or the mothers who have difficulties sometimes financially to send them to preschool and to daycare and so forth, we want to alleviate them of that burden and to make sure that those children get a good start. However, I will say to parents that they also should bear some of the responsibility. One of the things that we are looking at is how we can introduce parenting classes at the level of the preschool, of the daycare, so that the mothers who need these classes the most can be exposed. You'll be surprised that giving people the opportunity to be exposed to information can change attitude. And so we want to look at it holistically. But I can tell you more help is coming for these mothers when it comes to daycare and preschool. I want any child who is born in St. Kitts and Nevis have the enabling environment to be the best human being that he or she could be.
Right, and certainly getting a good start is very important for persons. Now, Prime Minister, we mentioned the three initiatives and you just outlined them. What mechanisms are in place to ensure that the things that were promised pre-election are actually turned into government policy today?
Right. So basically we have at the level of the Cabinet Secretary, he has our manifesto. The Cabinet Secretary would look at the promises, or the commitments rather, that were made, and we from there will develop a strategy of how we will introduce these, bringing them to the Cabinet, and then if we have to bring them to the Parliament. So we have a direct mechanism of how we do that. We have been able to do a lot of things from the manifesto, not all, and we have been able to do a lot more things that the manifesto did not even mention. If you look at our legislative activity, and I want to thank the AG, 22 pieces of legislation at least to strengthen our good governance laws here in St. Kitts and Nevis. That is historic, because never before had we done what was necessary to make sure that integrity in public life and good governance and so forth actually become a reality. We know in 2013 the laws were put in place. The Labour administration then was voted out in 2015. We heard from 2015 to 2022 a lot of talk about good governance, integrity in public life, and we have to face it. Nothing was done. And in less than a year, I have started the initial submission of my documentation to fulfill the legal obligation of that law, integrity in public life. So the mechanism is to look at our commitments, have it distilled at the level of the CABSEC, and bring in those so that we can make the cabinet decisions and the legislative decisions to make sure that we implement those commitments we made to the people.
Is there a ranking system that determines what should come first?
Right. So there are a number of things that really go into it. Not just because when you get into office, there is also a reality that you have to deal with. There are things that you met there that you never expected to meet. We had an idea that things could have been somewhat off, but it was way more off than we thought. For example, we never imagined that you could not count for tens of millions of dollars from Development Bank. We heard about surplus, and so when we were told that we actually had a deficit and not a surplus, that in itself was a shocker. When we saw that National Bank suffered its first loss, when people were talking, big profits and big dividends before, National Bank. When we saw that Development Bank was on the ropes. When we saw that Social Security was in the red in terms of, paying out more than it was bringing in. We recognized very quickly that this was an economic reality that we had to deal with. And that is why our first action was to strengthen the financial institutions and to put St. Kitts and Nevis back on track. And not to talk about the CBI program. Significant amount of work had to be done to strengthen that program and to protect our visa-free access. And we did so, not reactively, but proactively. So I would say that, in terms of ranking, one has to look at the environment that you actually met, the present condition and what need to be implemented quickly to deal with the present situation of the people, and what you had committed to. And so those would influence the ranking mechanism. For example, let's say you had a particular commitment you wanted to implement, but then something happens that you have to quickly respond to, then that will take precedent, even though that commitment definitely would have to be dealt with.
And of course, that is also dependent on external shocks as well, to not just what happens within St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right? Exactly.
So, Prime Minister,
Yes.
I also want to touch on the cabinet members that you have. You receive much commendation in terms of the makeup of it, that essentially they're very versatile. They're able to fill in for one another essentially on interministerial projects. They're aware of what's happening. They're able to lend good advice, good decisions, good support in those areas. Can you comment on this?
Well, I think that is a very good observation. I said during the campaign that we had an A-team, and it was not just for political mileage, but it's really because we have a team of really talented and competent people. If you look at the team, in almost any area, there is an accomplished person on the team. Not just somebody who would have heard about it or know about it, an accomplished person. So if you talk about medicine, of course, you would look at me, and I'm an accomplished doctor in the sense I'm a specialist and a member of the American Board of Internal Medicine and so forth. If you talk about engineering, you look at the Honorable Congress Maynard. He's an engineer by training, worked in the gas industry, fossil fuel, and one who believes now in the transition to renewables. But he worked at very high levels. If you look at the Honorable Samuel Duggins, who was a professional farmer. If you look at the Honorable Marsha Henderson, who was a well-established lawyer, the Honorable Jeffrey Hanley, a well-established civil servant, educator, an accomplished person within the community. The Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas was Prime Minister for 20 years. The Honorable Gart Wilkin was who was very accomplished during his studies as a lawyer, working one of the top legal firms here in St. Kitts and Nevis. The Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clark, who has a PhD, and she's dealing with sustainable development. The Honorable Iselin Phillip, who actually studied things to do with gender equality and so forth. And we are supported from time to time by two well-established ambassadors, Ambassador Leon Natter and Ambassador Kenneth Douglas. So when you look at the team, I don't think I left out anyone. And the reason why I mentioned each of their names is that they are very competent and capable. And so therefore, when I travel, Cabinet continues. Cabinet does not stop because I'm not here.
Which is unusual in the past, there will be a break.
There will be a break. Doesn't have to stop because you have competent people who can make competent decisions, and we are transparent and open with each other. Whatever decisions are made, they are sent to me, and I get a chance to see them, and I can reflect on them on the next cabinet. For example, I recently had a personal loss, couldn't attend the first town hall meeting, and that was led by the Deputy Prime Minister, stepping up to the plate, and you feel very comfortable. So as a team, we are very versatile. We have, and I can count on any member to continue the work if the work needs to continue. And that is not only good for the team, but it's good for St. Kitts and Nevis, so that when we travel, in whichever space we are in, we can be respected as persons in that space. And so, yes, I'm very, very proud of the team.
Government is continuous.
Yeah, very exactly.
Prime Minister, we want to delve a bit more into some specific policies now, but we'll take a quick break first.
Good.
And so we encourage you to stay with us. In Focus, we'll be right back.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to a special edition of In Focus. We continue our discussion with Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terrance Drew. Prime Minister, so it's been a year, as we mentioned from the beginning. Let's talk a bit more about some of your government's major achievements. And what would you say is your top achievement to date that the government has done? I know you listed some in particular, but what would you say is the top one?
I would say, from a policy standpoint, the Children's Fund, I'm almost pushing that to the top. I don't think anything can beat when you see children who have been dead alive and have an opportunity to live out their life. I would say the second one would be good governance, to finally get those good governance legislations to the point where we were able to submit our documentation. The other one was the rights to the Rastafarians. I think recognizing Rastafarians finally as a legitimate faith-based organization, our group, people of faith, and to be given their constitutional rights to express themselves like any other persons of any other faith-based organization or religion. I think that was a tremendous achievement as well. And to really deal with the cannabis issue once and for all, and to stop locking up our young people when they would have been caught with very small quantities of cannabis, and not be given the opportunities to really have a second chance. I think those will change people's lives. It will not be recognized immediately, but I think in the long run, it will strengthen us as a community and as a society. And I think that would have a tremendous positive impact going forward. But there are a number of tangible things that we have done thus far. 3 of them that you have mentioned. I will say in healthcare, we have done a tremendous amount thus far. Really securing the funding for a new smart hospital, because we need one, especially when it comes to climate change and all the other changes that would have made to enhance treatment at the JNF and within the healthcare sector. There's more work to be done, but we have done a tremendous amount of work. I can go from ministry to ministry and talk all day about the different policies. If you look at tourism and see what the Honorable Marsha Henderson would have done, she would have, with her team, in terms of expansion of airlift and making sure tourism is back on track and so forth. And so I can go from one ministry to the other. But if you ask me, those that I mentioned are legacy things that will be with us for a long time. And persons who don't see the full effect now will see the full effect in time.
Well, Prime Minister, I want to go through some of them bit by bit, of course.
Sure.
And you mentioned healthcare, so perhaps we should start there. Of course, the government has been on drive in terms of, as you mentioned, to have a smart hospital built, but also work has been taking place in the meantime to improve the services that are available at the Joseph Nathaniel France, which would include machinery, which would include the waste the staff delivers their service, which of course, as you mentioned, is very important to you. Yes, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I think I worked at the JNF hospital for a very long time. Well, a long time, let me put it that way. And I think I'm one of the few healthcare professionals who have worked in almost every institutional area in the hospital. I've worked in all the wards at JNF, all the wards. I've also worked in the prison, worked at Cardin Home, worked in the outside district. So I've worked at every level within the Ministry of Health. And I would say that we have excellent healthcare professionals. There are sometimes complaints of customer service and bedside manner. And that means a lot to me personally as a healthcare professional. And I know sometimes the nurses are very overwhelmed and stressed, and sometimes they can come across to persons as uncaring, but I know they do care and they do have compassion, but maybe the way in which they express it sometimes. But I would say the vast majority of nurses deliver good service in terms of their manner and so forth. And so to improve that though, we have started a series of workshops and training opportunities for customer care, customer service at the JNF hospital especially, where we had Mrs. Adelcia Bradley King, who just completed a round of customer service training for our nurses fundamentally. And we'll put them through another round. Just this week, we had a training with Mr. Curtis Martin and advisor Dr. Patrick Martin at Kittition Hill, where the nurse managers were taken there to, of course, engage in a meaningful workshop as well. So we are determined that we should not only look at the machinery and the aesthetic of a new hospital and new MRI and so forth. Those things have been coming and are coming. But we want the experience of our people at JNF to be an experience that is unforgettable in the sense of the quality that is delivered. And we are going to work on that so that when you go there, you are treated how you think you should be treated. So we're not going to leave anything for chance. And so we're going to train the healthcare workers to make sure that that type of service is delivered.
Have you gotten feedback, Prime Minister, from the persons who would have been trained and also for patients going to JNF? Has there been any improvements?
Well, I will say the complaints are less. There are still some complaints, but the complaints have lessened, which tells me that people are feeling the effect of improved care. I have gotten a number of emails to say that they have gotten good care, and those numbers have gone up. The complaints are still there. I remember when we used to get complaints about the blood bank, but we inherited that. We were able to fix that. I remember people speaking about the waiting time at A&E. We have improved that by bringing back some of the retired nurses to help with the triage and so forth. And so I would say that there is improvement. Is there more work to be done? Yes, there's more work to be done. This is an ongoing process, and we will make sure that we do the work that we have to get done. I would mention that we have been declared a child-friendly hospital by PAHO, and that is a major achievement, which means that children who are born in JNF are born into a friendly environment. That is a big step in the right direction in terms of when dealing with service. And breastfeeding, we just did a whole course on breastfeeding, and you'll probably see a story with me being presented by Nurse Duncan, who headed that along with the PAHO, PS and so forth from the ministry, to show that we are really making strides. We had the World Pediatric League here to work with our nurses and doctors to deal with newborns to make sure that they're given the best opportunity of survival. So I would say at the end of the day, we are not taking customer service at JNF lightly. We have done significant things and we'll continue to work, and we ask the public to continue to work with us at JNF as we seek to improve delivery of good quality, compassionate service.
Prime Minister, you also mentioned the tourism in terms of the ability of persons to get to St. Kitts and Nevis, whether it be by air or by sea. We've seen, of course, quite a number of airlines come on board recently, or those who are yet to come on board, but they have announced that they will do so later this year, such as JetBlue. We've seen Inter-Caribbean, we've seen Caribbean Airlines, and quite a few others who have come on board in terms of the airlift. And also for the cruise season, we've seen quite a number of inaugural calls as well. So last year, of course, the cruise season is on a break, due to the Atlantic hurricane season, but things, from what I understand from the Ministry of Tourism, are expected to pick back up very soon. Talk to us a bit about making St. Kitts and Nevis more accessible to the international traveler, and how that will benefit the man on the street in Bastia, the lady in the street in Charlestown.
Yes, that is a very good question, because tourism is still a fundamental pillar of our economy here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And we have to make sure that we continue to expand the product in terms of its quality as well. We have to make sure that we do all that we can do so that tourism can continue to deliver what is expected to be delivered. By having more flights, JetBlue out of New York all year round, having American Airlines, Air Canada, and other international airlines, from even from Great Britain, England specifically, where we have British Airways, and having, in addition to those, having regional airlines coming in, such as Inter-Caribbean, Caribbean Airlines, and other smaller airlines that are flying into St. Kitts, which means you would expect that there be an increase in airlift to St. Kitts and Nevis. That translates into more taxi operators getting jobs, translates into what they say in the industry, more heads in beds, meaning more persons staying in hotels, and meaning that hotel staff can be kept employed and so forth, and everything else that comes with that. And when you have the cruise industry, which is expanding, you can see the number of calls we are getting. And this season coming up is expected to be a busy season, especially we will have the largest ships again coming into Bastia, expanding even beyond 2023. With that influx, we expect, of course, monies to be, had, increase in our financial resources as a result. And that will directly affect the people on the street, because when they come in, they have to get a taxi. That taxi driver makes money. He go to buy from a store. He wants his yard cut. He wants somebody to deliver some other services to him. He has to go get a haircut. So the barber will benefit. The persons who are into landscaping, they will benefit. The man at the shop will benefit, because he's going to buy a drink. And so therefore, as you can see, each dollar that comes in has the potential of touching all of us in different capacities here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we are saying that as we expand tourism, this will have a tremendous positive impact on our people.
Especially important coming off of the COVID-19 pandemic, where things, essentially slow down throughout the world, and so persons,
and we are still recovering.
Yes, of course.
We have not recovered fully. And part of the reason, again, why the other islands in the OECS recovered much quicker, especially in the tourism sector, is because they opened up earlier. So we are delayed 3 months because we waited until August to open instead of May.
Prime Minister, as we speak about international travel, I want to speak specifically now in terms of the government's strategy of re-engaging with the diplomatic community, re-engaging with international organizations as well. So, of course, we've seen that ministers of government and various representatives from government have gone and done that. Tell us a bit about the strategy behind it.
Right. So you hit the nail on the head. Being in St. Kitts, St. Kitts Nevis, which is a small country, we cannot do it alone. We need to have partnerships, regional partnerships and international partnerships, in order to achieve what we want to achieve in establishing a sustainable island state. Maybe I'll speak to that a little later, because that is our overarching goal, developing a sustainable island state. To do such, you have to make sure that you have the necessary engagement. For example, My first trip was to Barbados, where the Afrexim Bank was coming into the Caribbean for the first time. Right now, the Afrexim Bank is establishing headquarters in Barbados. We have already signed MOUs with the Afrexim Bank to have a number of projects here in St. Kitts and Nevis. You can't do that sitting in an office in Bastia. You have to travel in order to achieve that. My next trip after that was to go to the United Nations. As a member of the United Nations, UNGA, you have to make sure that you are present there.
And that would be the UN General Assembly.
The UN General Assembly, and mostly in September. And that where you have to go to meet leaders from other countries so that you can build those, you can collaborate and build those partnerships. I later went to Taiwan. Taiwan is a strong development partner for St. Kitts and Nevis. We had an official visit to Taiwan in November last year. You can't stay in Bastia and do those things. So our trips are really centered around our strategy to develop a sustainable island state. Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to reach? For example, the Honorable Marcia Henderson, initially she was being criticized for her trips. And I kept saying, she has to travel, because each time she travels, she brings back a boat, she brings back a plane. How do you think she'll be able to get JetBlue? She can't sit in Bastia and get JetBlue to come here. I understand there would always be legitimate question as to why the ministers are traveling. That is why I always say that before we travel, we let the people know we are traveling. When we come back, we let the people know. And we also let the people know what was the result of that particular trip, so that the people can link trip to results. That is why after each trip I make, I come back and I have what you call the round table, where I sit with the press and I fundamentally discuss the trip that I was on and how that will benefit the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The Honorable Samuel Duggins had to travel to Guyana, had to travel to Central America as he seeks to build out the 25-25, decreasing our import of food by 25% by 2025. Only by doing these collaboration can he really have a chance to achieve that goal. The other day, the Honorable Congressman and I traveled to the United Nations for the first time in our history, our voluntary national review that was presented to the United Nations, so people can see where St. Kitts and Nevis is headed, and so that we can collaborate even more and people can take us more seriously. The reason why I'm going through one by one, almost for everybody, is that people can see that the trip is linked directly to them. These trips bring results for the country and bring results for you. So when I traveled and I was discussing the hospital, let's say in Taiwan, that hospital is going to be built, and who you think going to benefit? Our people will benefit from that. When I traveled and I'm now working to bring renal transplant back to St. Kitts, where I made that connection in the UK, who do you think that will benefit? Our people. So when those planes come in and bring in tourists, and we make more financial resources as a result, who do you think that benefit? The people. And so these trips are really geared at helping our people to deliver for our people. I said to people, traveling is hectic, very hectic. It takes more out of you than to stay here in St. Kitts and work, because you have to do a lot in a short time. And I am pleased that the ministers have traveled and that they have delivered and they continue to deliver. And the people of St. Kitts and Nevis seeing those tangible benefits and will continue to see those tangible benefits.
Prime Minister, let's come back to the local level now and speak a bit about crime.
Yes.
Of course, it has been a challenging few months, challenging part of the year, so for instance, as well, too, in terms of a number of gun-related crimes. And we want you to help to expound a bit about the strategy that the government has. Of course, we know that there were a number of personnel moves made in terms of the high command. There was a new commissioner appointed. Are there any more strategic moves to be made within the law enforcement or the security infrastructure that you can speak of, and also give us a bit in terms of what is being done to help to tackle and make law and order, of course, the priority here for persons within St. Kitts and Nevis, so that citizen security can be felt by everyone.
Right. So citizen security is critically important. One has to have a drop back. We had an unsustainable arrangement in the last administration, a program that they termed the peace program, that we know had structural issues and management issues, that people knew that that was not the best arrangement to have. We said that we needed an arrangement where the people in the program can benefit truly from rehabilitation and be given the real chance to reintegrate into society. Since then, we have made some changes. We have upgraded, we have introduced the Elevate program, which we will pan out even more in terms of structure and in terms of the objectives that are to be achieved. But within national security apparatus itself, there are some significant changes that were made in terms of, there was a change in the commissioner. As you know, the last commissioner, we thank him for his service. He had reached the retirement age and had retired. And through a very transparent process, Commissioner Sutton became the new commissioner. We had not had a deputy commissioner for a few years, and so now we have a deputy commissioner. And so there are other measures being taken to make sure that the full cadre of police officers from the top down, that they are filled to the point where we have restarted training for the police officers that was launched very recently. We have also taken some decisions to have two advisors, one an advisor and a new NSA, as the contract for the last NSA had come to an end. And these two new advisors in national security are Kittians. And so those are some of the significant changes that had been made. But in addition to that, we have also sought to develop a strategy, but we have also sought to establish new agencies. For example, we now have re-established the Canine Unit, which is critical for both customs and for the police. We met the CCTV structure in shambles, and we have now invested in re-establishing the CCTV to the level that it was at, that it should be at. We have also introduced a fusion center, which we have now located in a particular place, and in that fusion center where everything is actually looked at. We have expanded our collaboration with regional and international partners, such as the US, the UK, Canada, and so forth. And so that has been expanded, so that is going to have a direct impact, positive impact on our national security apparatus. So we have also invested in equipment. We have also invested in machinery where these things should be done. So we have gone, and we are very keen to partner, for example, with the RSS to make sure that the necessary high-level training takes place. So what we have seen, especially if you look at the trend was very like that. The trend has come down, right? We know we are having results. But the good thing about this is that whatever now results we are having, we are putting structures in place so that they become sustainable and practical and free of corruption. Very important. And that is why we have decided to treat crime and violence as a public health matter. As you know, it's not just St. Kitts and Nevis alone that is dealing with this upsurge. Because we know that in the Caribbean, there is a free flow of guns almost from North America down to us, to the point where now the United States is now increasing its activity in the Caribbean region to help to stop the flow of guns. We can't do it alone. We don't make guns here in the Caribbean. Yet we see all sorts of guns. And the United States, we said to them that you need to take more responsibility in the transshipment of guns from the United States to the Caribbean. And they have obliged and have put a number of things, and I would like to congratulate them for doing that and thank them for doing that, because it is important. I have been to a number of critical meetings at the U.S. Embassy. I've also been to meetings in Trinidad where we have met with personnel and experts from the U.S. who have now increased their activities in terms of establishing a vetting center and so forth. They have donated a boat to us. They're going to put onshore radar for us so that we can protect our borders while we can and help to prevent entrance of illegal weapons and drugs and so forth into St. Kitts and Nevis. So I'm saying all of that to say, in that short time, we have taken a number of critical measures, steps, and we have made significant investments to make sure that we establish a national security apparatus that is effective, that is sustainable, and that will deliver the results that people expect it to deliver. It cannot be a program that you just put together for a short term and then at the end of the day it can end up in a worse situation than before you started it. That will not happen under our watch, under my watch. We want a good national security apparatus that can deliver the citizen security that it should deliver. But we're not only looking at the national security apparatus, we are looking at other programs. For example, in schools, we are bringing back the scouts, sending back the cadet corps to the schools to recruit. The Explorers Club. We want all these groups that used to be in the community to establish themselves so that young people can have good options. One of the frightening things is when the police officer was speaking and he said that they went to the primary school and there were people in the primary school, children saying they want to go on to the peace program. Because that program had become somehow notorious to them in that, you just, whatever it was. We want young people to say, no, I want to be something else. And that is why we want to give them the opportunities even from that age. That's why it's important to have strong preschool, strong daycare, strong primary school, and give them opportunity post-secondary to educate themselves. So we are looking at it from a holistic standpoint where everybody has to be involved in national security. But no resource will be spared in terms of making sure that our citizen security is where it's supposed to be and would have to be. Despite what is happening all around within the Caribbean, and we expected this to some extent, we are now moving to make sure that this issue is dealt with in the Caribbean. The last point I will make is that there was a study done by the World Bank that dealt with violence within the Caribbean societies because they had found a high level of interpersonal violence. It's just that the guns give an opportunity to do what they have to do. And a number of recommendations were given. We did not adopt those recommendations, and we are determined that we will adopt those scientifically proven recommendations to deal with the long-term, to deal with the issue of citizen security on a long-term basis, an intermediate and a short-term basis as well.
Okay. Prime Minister, you mentioned that there were 2 new advisors. Any news that you care to break on our show today?
No, they'll be working, Dr. Powell and Dr. Rollins. Dr. Powell has been there earlier this year, I think June, and Dr. Rollins recently started, maybe in the last 2 weeks or so. Mm-hmm. And so we are going to put this together. What I like about it is that both of them are academicians, and it shows that we have the necessary expertise within our diaspora to help us, especially in critical areas such as security. But in addition to that, they have both decided to give up, some of, the economic advantage they might have had in other jurisdictions. In other words, take a pay cut to come to St. Kitts and Nevis, to contribute to their country. Right? That is what you call patriotism, putting country above self. And I encourage more of our citizens who have the expertise and want to lend a hand and can fit in to come and help us to get it done. So I want to applaud them for really stepping up, making the personal sacrifices, because we really can't pay them what they would make in other jurisdictions. But they will come and they will contribute because they love their country, St. Kitts and Nevis. Going back to that theme of service that you opened the program with, of course.
Correct. Now, Prime Minister, let's also talk quickly about the land issue. Of course, there are some persons who were on lands, as we call them, squatters.
Yes.
The government has made a move to try to help them to become landowners in the first instance.
Yes. Well, that's true, especially in the Buckley's area and in the Upper Monkey area. For example, in the Upper Monkey area, there had been families living on the land for possibly over 100 years, and they had no title to the land. And Upper Monkey is where I come from. Being landless and not having title to land, that situation makes it more difficult to build wealth and to become economically independent or financially independent. Land, can serve to help to, have that collateral to advance oneself. And therefore, we are now moving to have the land available for those families in Upper Monkey Hill, in Buckley's specifically. And so they will become landowners, and that is what we are moving towards at this time.
And quickly, Prime Minister, in terms of the issue of housing, of course we know that there is a partnership with the East Coast Development Corporation, which is a Trinidad-based company. I understand that would have been some movement there. We would have seen some initial designs unveiled. They were changed, and that was based on the feedback from the public, showing that the government is responsive to the demands of the population.
Right, and that is true. We initially put out the initial drawings and specs of the houses. We had feedback that people wanted some more space. We went back to the drawing board and said, let's give the people some more space. And so those rooms, I think, will increase. The bedrooms will increase to 12 by 12. That is what I think. But they have been made larger. And I think when the new designs came out, I think people were very pleased with what they saw. Today, myself and Mr. Singh of East Coast, the Deputy Prime Minister, the General Manager, the technical official from NHC, we went to the two sites of where we'll build the two model houses, one being in Connery and one being in Taylor's village. So we visited both sites. And so we are getting ready in the next few weeks to really put out our housing revolution, as we call it. This gives people the opportunity to own a home. As we know, with the shipping cost and with inflation, the cost of homes around the world went up significantly. This gives us an opportunity to have a low-cost home of good quality, but that is also expected to leave less of a carbon footprint, especially when we're talking about climate change, and a home that can withstand the strength of hurricanes as well. So there are pluses when it comes to this initiative of making homes available to our people. Our people have been asking for homes. Building a few homes here and there is not going to resolve the problem. We really need a housing revolution in order to resolve this matter, and that is what we are moving towards right now. As we see, National Bank just launched their Switch program, and they are going to launch another program as well, giving our people more opportunities to be able to go to a reputable financial institution owned by the people of St. Kitts and Nevis to get the necessary resources so that they can own their home and they have something to build wealth and pass on to the next generation. So housing and land are very critical for us, and already we are making the moves now to deal with those issues.
Prime Minister, we're almost out of time for this program, so I will give you an opportunity to speak about any future projects that you'd like to talk about. I know one in particular, not to necessarily influence you, would be the minimum wage. There's been much discussion on that.
Right. So we have started the discussions on the minimum wage. It's a decade now since the minimum wage was moved. We are in discussion with the private sector, in discussion with the union, the Labor Department, and other stakeholders to really start to move the minimum wage. For example, some of it is being said. We have agreed that the minimum wage needs to increase. The issue we are discussing is by how much at this initial stage. Do we do it one time? Do we have to do it stepwise? Because, as you know, we are post-COVID. This is one of the positions being put forward. Because we stayed locked down for longer than expected, the trajectory of the economic growth was a little bit retarded as a result, but we still moved in the positive direction, and we're expecting to grow. So we are going to deal with that as well. So I want the people of St. Kitts to know that that is being discussed heavily, and we are going to touch the issue of the minimum wage. But I will say in the broader economy, we have become stable. We are stabilized now in terms of the the banks and the financial institutions. Just in June, it was the best month ever for inland revenue, ever, collection month ever in its history. So there was a lot of recovery. As I said, Social Security is back in the green and not in the red. National Bank turned a profit and will be able to pay dividends. And therefore, Development Bank now is increasing its revenue, and it's becoming more stable. So what we have seen generally is a steady increase in the stability of our economic system, and that now is going to open up the opportunities to really help our people to feel the tangible benefits from those things. And so those things will be rolling out through our major capital projects, the hospital, the roads to St. Peter's, the Conway play field, the housing, the Basti High School, multiple things will be coming out, and that will provide jobs, economic activity, and give people the opportunity to build themselves and to build wealth. But I will tell you, one of the plans we have to do to build wealth is to divest shares that the government has in various institutions. For example, cable, to divest those shares and allow people to buy shares so that they can look for a dividend at the end of the year too. And we are now in the process of establishing a desal plant and so forth, and we want to create a company where we can divest the shares and give our people the opportunity to buy shares into the desal plant. And when we establish the solar plants, we want to give people the opportunity to buy shares as well, so that you don't only have an income from your job, but you can say, look, let me invest in these companies, and which are very secure companies to invest in, because everybody wants water, everybody wants electricity, correct? And everybody wants technology. And if you can own a piece of those through shares, you can have passive income coming in. Even when you're retired, you have some passive income coming in, something you can even pass on to your descendants. So in that sense, you know, it is a way to help our people to build wealth as well, and to become financially stable and also financially savvy, because you have to also get a financial education in order to take advantage of these opportunities. And we will also introduce financial education for our people. So we have a number of things just ready to roll out. We have stabilized the country, stabilized the finances, and we are really on the verge of going forward with those bigger plans that we had promised or committed to with the people.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the financial aspect of it, the financial training, because the Honorable Iselin Phillip was with us earlier this week on Wednesday during our usual show, and she spoke about having the financial training integrated in terms of the poverty alleviation program.
Yes.
So that our people can be better able to manage their resources, which would help them to better manage their household, which would help them to make better decisions as in terms of spending, which helps the economy, which helps the household to empower, which fits into all the sustainable development agenda that the government has.
And that is exactly the point. We have to educate our people, because that is the only way we can do it, if we are to establish a sustainable island state. I always say that we as a people like to admire Europe and Britain, and we all Canada and so forth. And sometimes if we were to adopt some of their policies, we get some resistance sometimes. And the resistance is there mainly because I think it's a matter of education. Or people are smart people who have been exposed to education. So if you give them the right kind of information, they will respond to it positively, and that will lead our people to make the right decision. And that is critical to build a sustainable island state.
Prime Minister, we are out of time.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being with us, and there's so much more that we could have spoken about. You know, one of the things that I would have loved to have touched on would be the student loans, the interest rates, you know, and that's something that I think that I would love to have you come back and so we can discuss a bit more, because it really affects the whole issue as we spoke about in terms of building our people through education so that, you know, the country can move forward. We always had a high literacy rate, but it's not necessarily about the basic now. It's about advancing tertiary education, university, helping to develop St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we'd love to have you back so we could discuss some more about these things.
No problem. Yeah. So I look forward to being with you some other time, and we can continue the discussion. But just to say to our people, we'll be at my office this afternoon in St. Peter's, our 1 year, part of the celebrations there, and they're invited to come to St. Peter's there in Douglas. But I want to thank you, Ian, and thank the staff of InFocus for having me here today and having this quite informative, in-depth discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Yes. And thank you, viewers and listeners, for being with us for this very special edition of InFocus. We pray that you will join us next week on Wednesday, when we'll have our regular scheduled program. For now, I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for In Focus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. In Focus, your government, your business.